On this episode of the Surviving Outside Sales podcast, I sit down with Angie Thomas, a former sales rep turned lead esthetician turned owner of her own skincare line. We're going to talk about the process of how she transitioned from each phase and what she's doing today and what's going to happen in the future. As always, if you like what you hear, please subscribe, download, share with your friends, reach out to the show. We'd love to hear from you. Now, on to the show. Intro. The Surviving Outside Sales podcast, hosted by Mike O'Kelly, presented by Rhythm AI. The goal is to get in, dominate, then get out. Surviving Outside Sales. Now on with the show. Welcome to the Surviving Outside Sales podcast. With me today is the co-owner and founder of Loveskin by Angie Thomas. Angie Thomas, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Mike. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for joining. I met Angie several years ago. She is the lead esthetician at Graper Harper Cosmetic Surgery in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was selling some products into their office, which they graciously became very good customers of. So I always have a very soft spot for Angie and her team. How is everything going with you, Angie, at Graper Harper?
Really well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Very good. Been challenged in the last couple of years, but you know what? Every now and then when you work for somebody for 24 years, it's good to be challenged.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's go back to the beginning. So for the audience, Angie is a 30-year veteran of the skincare industry, and she has treated tens of thousands of patients and has seen the evolution of the aesthetic space and where it is today. And we're going to talk about her journey of where she came from and where she's headed. So Angie, why don't you take us back to when you got started and give us a little bit of background into your journey?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started, Mike, I was in sales. I was working in cosmetics at Belk South Park. So that was my background, was sales, and then was promoted to management. So we had over 30 skincare lines at Belk South Park, and just kind of fell in love with it there. And so North Carolina at the time did not have an aesthetic license. And so I chose to leave, pack up, go to Washington, D.C., and go to aesthetic school and stay there for 3-4 years just to get the experience. Came back to Charlotte to rally for North Carolina to get a license. And in that interim, I worked in outside sales, just a rep, repping different skincare lines, beds, lights, anything that it would take a cosmetologist, not an esthetician at the time, to get herself set up in a salon or a spa. So I did outside sales, up until North Carolina got a license, and then I went into practice. And so fast forward, Dr. Graper is my third plastic surgeon. And so I have seen a lot of changes in my industry, everything from chemical peeling to devices that compete with surgical devices to skincare lines to, lots of changes.
Well, Angie, I didn't realize that you were in outside sales. And now I understand why you were so nice to the sales reps. Because, not that you're not a nice person in general, but you've actually lived it. So you understand the problems, the issues, the challenges that come from both sides of the coin, not only trying to drive business as an esthetician, but also as a sales role. That's fantastic. And
yes.
Yeah,
the reason a couple of things happened in my life, in my career. Outside sales was hard. It was hard, pounding the pavement, flying to New York, doing shows, trade shows, all of that. And then I had a baby. So, and I think the drill, once you have children, you have to figure out how to do life different. And so it was kind of, what was that year that I had my second child that I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't travel. North Carolina got a license and I went into practice.
Would you have stayed in sales if the situation was different? Let's say you pushed back having children for a few years. Did you enjoy it?
I did. I loved the travel piece of it. But when you have a kid, all that changes. But I did like sales. I came from sales. But there again, I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my neck, because when I went to school to be an esthetician, I was pretty anxious to get my hands on a face. So a little bit of both,
Yeah.
a little bit of both.
What companies did you work for? The skincare companies?
So the lines that I repped were Dr. Eckstein, and then a European line called Academy.
Okay.
And then the beds that we sold were from Dynex. So the aesthetic beds, and then the lights, the diagnostic lights that estheticians use to look at skins. So a couple of different lines. And again, it was successful up until the point that I thought I got to do something different. But as an esthetician, you combine both. You get to get your hands on a face and a body, and you get to sell product. So it's the best of both worlds.
Well, that's awesome. What was it like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, whenever you were in outside sales? What was it like in the industry? Kind of paint the picture for those who are in sales now and don't really realize the trailblazing you probably did in the aesthetic world.
I would say 25 years ago, I mean, there were no online sales. Everything that we sold to a spa, to a practice, was sold at that practice. You didn't have the competition of social media, people going online to compete with what they're selling in the office. So that truly, Mike, has been the biggest challenge in transition for me as an esthetician to work at a practice, sell 7, 8, 9 skincare lines, and have them have a website, a social media presence, and the patient, the consumer, is shopping. She wants a deal, and she knows she can get a deal. 25 years ago, Mike, it wasn't like that. You went in, you sold Dr. Eckstein, Academy, whatever it was, and that spa put it on their shelf. That esthetician or 2 estheticians sold that product line, and it sold so well, but you didn't have the consumer go into a website, again, social media, to compete with that esthetician sales in the office. So that's been the biggest change, the biggest challenge for me. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was your territory?
Well, I did a lot of national shows. I worked for the gal that owned the company, owned Charles Grayson. Her name is Robbie Krug. And Charles Grayson was one of the biggest spas here in Charlotte. And so Skin and Spa Concepts was her company. And we did, shows in Miami, shows in New York, but locally we just kind of pounded the pavement, just like when I met you. We'd go to an office, hand out our card, hand out a flyer, brochure, introduce ourselves, ask if we could do a lunch and learn. So kind of the same thing when I first met you. And if we got the good graces, right, to be invited in for the lunch and learn, then usually we would capture the attention of the staff and they would fall in love with the product. We would leave samples and bam, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, but you left out the biggest thing. That's the difference. The technology. I mean, it's so much easier now as a sales rep because of the supercomputer that we have in our hands at all times.
This is true.
And I don't know if you ran into this. My dad was in sales and he retired. I think it was sometime around the turn of the century. And he was in pharmaceutical sales, and he used to he had rolls of quarters in his car because he'd have to go to payphones and check his company's voicemail to see if anybody had called asking for samples or for meetings and things like that. There was no technology back then. In fact, I think he got a beeper the last couple years he was in the field. He got a pager, which is hilarious now because most everybody has iPads and they've got smartphones, and the world is in the palm of our hands, literally. And my dad's out there with taped up quarter rolls, just trying to find payphones, which if anybody's under the age of 25, yeah, there were phones that you used to go in and put quarters in and used to make phone calls, and they were all over the place, and you'd find out where the best payphone was because that was the way you got in touch with people. I mean,
Well, I'm gonna
yeah.
admit to something. This is gonna be sort of embarrassing, but I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna do it. So I'm from Waynesville. So I grew up about 40 miles west of Asheville.
Okay.
Okay. And so a tiny, tiny town, you never really even needed to know the names of the streets. You just know that you turn right, you turn left, there's a stop sign, there you go. And so when I came to Charlotte, I went to American Business and Fashion Institute, but our dorm was at Queens College.
Okay.
Because it was a private girls' school, but they rented and housed all of us at Queens. And so anytime I had to go anywhere beyond Queens, I had to go all the way back to Queens in order to find my way to get anywhere in Charlotte. And the game changer for me was Independence Boulevard, because everything stems off of Independence Boulevard, right? But everything's Sharon Amity, Sharon Park, Sharon Lane, Sharon Road. I'm like, oh my gosh. So maybe if I just find Sharon, I'm gonna be fine.
Where's that Sharon? No, I understand. When I first moved to Charlotte, my sister lived here already, and she went to Clemson and she worked for Bank of America, and she was a few years older. And I'd finished college and I was playing baseball for a few years in the minors, so I needed a place to live. My sister said, "Why don't you come to Charlotte?" And I've been a little bit of a contrarian. All my friends were moving to DC, New York, Richmond, and Richmond is where I grew up, but I just didn't want to have the same friends. I didn't want to have college 2.0. So I said, sure, I'll move to Charlotte. And I got a U-Haul, a trailer behind my car, and I came down here. And I remember I printed out MapQuest directions, not to get to my sister's place, because that was quite easy. She lived on Olmsted Park in Dilworth. Now it's right behind the Lowe's off of South Boulevard, and it was very simple to get to. But it wasn't very easy for me, and this is where I'm tying in that reference, to find the closest U-Haul that I had to drop it off was off of North Tryon on the other side of the train tracks of Uptown. And I remember looking at the directions, and it was like, get onto 4th Street. 4th Street becomes Randolph. And then it was like, hit South Tryon, take a right. South Tryon turns into North Tryon. And I was like, what? And really all it is now is like, you basically get on to Randolph Road and take a left. And then basically once you hit Tryon, take a right. But I was so confused. I was like, wait a minute, 4th Street or Randolph turns into 4th Street. And I was like, wait a minute. And then I had to, when I first I had to get a map when I first moved to Charlotte, and I had to study the map. For those of you who are listening who do not live in Charlotte, North Carolina, the roads change names several times. In fact, if you're coming from the Charlotte airport and you want to get across town to Independence Boulevard, which Angie said, as the crow flies, it's about, I don't know, 8 to 12 miles. Yeah. And in that 8 to 12 miles, you will hop on Billy Graham Parkway, which turns into Woodlawn, which turns into Runnymede, which I think turns into Wendover, which hits Monroe Road, which I think crosses in, you drive up Monroe Road till it hits Sharon, or is it Idlewild, which turns into Rama. I mean, there are so many streets in Charlotte that change names, and you don't switch streets. It's the same street. So I am right there with you. I was lost for most of the first year and a half. And this was back where there was no GPS. It was MapQuest. And so I was legitimately just MapQuesting directions to go over to a friend's house. And then, but I
know every guy or gal in a gas station so well. I mean, I have no problem stopping and asking for directions still to this day. If my phone goes dead or whatever, no shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that, or like you said, your daddy. I mean, you had to have some quarters, right?
Yes.
And I look sometimes driving down the road, there's no payphones.
Oh no, they're completely gone. They're completely gone. Yeah. And it's something that, it happened so quickly that you don't remember seeing them. Like, I can't visualize what a payphone looks like anymore, or where it was located, because they're just completely gone. And there's not even, at least in the city of Charlotte or the cities that I've traveled, I've covered North Carolina, South Carolina. I've been all over the United States, and I don't remember seeing any payphones, they're just completely gone, even the remnants of it in smaller
Yeah.
towns. But all right, so let's get back on your story. So we've gone on a little bit of a tangent, which if you've listened to any of the episodes, people are probably like, yep, Mike can do that. So all right, you're in sales, and so you're about to start a family. And so was it one of those things where you were planning on it and then you said, all right, this is my exit out of sales? Or was it, I just can't travel anymore, so I need to find something that I have a passion about? What was your thought process there?
Well, a little bit of both. Just, I worked for someone that owned a spa. I mean, Robbie Krug was someone that taught me a lot in my industry. She had a very successful spa and she was just smart. She was just smart. She taught me so much. And, like I said, at the same time, North Carolina got a license for estheticians. However, I had to go back and take my state boards all over again. They would not transfer from DC. So I had to take my exam, written and practical, passed it. And a friend reached out and said that, a plastic surgeon was looking for an esthetician. Would I be interested in interviewing? And the hours were better, because when I was traveling, that was so hard. And then backing up to being in retail, like when I was at Belk South Park, those hours were tremendous, particularly during the holidays. You had no time off, but for plastic surgery, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You're not working on Saturday. You're not working on Sunday. So I thought, you know what, let me go interviewed, and that was a real change, a pivot in my career. So that plastic surgeon was willing to support me in my education, and at that time I could go to any symposium for estheticians that were working in plastic surgery. So I just spent probably that first year educating myself, the difference between working in a spa side of aesthetics and working in plastic surgery / dermatology. So that was kind of a game changer for me. Again, he's one of three that I worked for, and I worked for him for 2 or 3 years.
What do you think the difference is about med spa versus the plastic and the dermatology? You mentioned learning that difference. What is that difference in your opinion?
For me, the plastic surgery side of aesthetics is result driven. And I don't want to put down med spas or what that is, because that's so relaxing. There's a place for it. When I travel with my husband, I take advantage of services, at spas while he's working. So I think there's a place for both. And I always tell estheticians that when I teach at the school here in Charlotte. I make them go around the room and say, what side of this industry do you want to be in? And then I talk about the difference. Yes, there's a difference, but the spa side is so relaxing and holistic. And so that's, some people want to be organic, holistic. For me, I mean, it is result driven. The game changers for melasma, wrinkles, laxity, pigment changes. And so, yeah, I think it's result driven for me, Mike.
Okay. I when I started selling post-procedure kits in the plastic surgery world, I heard the difference between med spas and plastics, where the plastics worked on the body first and then the mind. Whereas in med spas, like you said, it really is the mind first and then the body. It's that relaxation. It is, let me get into the right state of quote unquote Zen, and then my body will look good. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
a good way to put it, though. I think that's fair. Yeah, for sure.
It is interesting. I worked in dermatology sales in pharmaceutical companies for years, and I would bring up aesthetics to these offices. When are you getting into this? I'd go to conferences and I'd see the aesthetic companies, the laser companies, Cool Sculpting, all those different devices. And so I'd ask some of these dermatologists, when are you guys going to get into this? Or gals, when are you going to get into this? And they said, oh, no, we're just about the skin. And I kind of laugh now because that was like 6 years ago. Every dermatology company or every dermatology clinic has an aesthetic side.
Exactly.
And so not only has the aesthetics industry gone online, but now it's med spas. There are therapy clinics. It's in dermatology. It's in OBGYN now. It is everywhere. I mean, the competition for aesthetics and eyeballs are everywhere. I think it has never been more competitive. And I think it's only going to continue, like we mentioned offline and we've talked about in the past. And so you've seen almost the infancy of aesthetics. And I do realize aesthetics, I think, have been around since the 70s. I know that plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery started, I think, in the 70s. If I'm not, you'd probably be able to educate me on that. But was it the 70s or 80s?
70s.
70s. Yeah. So it's been around since
I
the 70s.
Yeah. To your point, Mike, I remember, when I worked for my first plastic surgeon, I mean, there were no devices. None.
Wow.
It was either you had a facelift or you had a facelift.
You got cut or you got cut, right?
Exactly. And so for me as an esthetician, I was certified in dermaplaning, and then it was a chemical peel. A chemical peel, and you had maybe 5 choices in the beginning. And the biggest company, the only company, was Biomedic. And they made a big splash in the industry. So again, there were no devices. So that's something that has changed. To your point, now you're saying exactly, now dermatology, or they're recognizing it. OBGYNs, is definitely growing. But devices, that's what's changed it.
Oh, absolutely. And we were speaking offline to one of the devices that I represent, which is Indiba, and it's a company out of Spain. And I'm not going to plug too hard about it, but we were just talking about how technology is invading everywhere, especially in the sales world, but it's bringing out some of the best devices. And what it's also doing, it's affording small clinics to have the power to compete against the big Graper Harper Cosmetic Surgery. Whereas I don't think they could have in the past, at least from a revenue standpoint. You can use a device, it doesn't matter what it is, a laser, a body contouring, or Indiba skin tightening. It is going to bring in revenue that's going to keep your doors open and keep you profitable. Whereas everybody sells Botox. And what is Botox? Between $9 and $12 a shot? Or has that gone up now?
Yeah, it can go up to 14.
Yeah. So about $14. But in other words, that's you have to do a lot of injections to get revenue. You have to sell a lot of that to get the same revenue that you can get from 1 or 2 patients with a device. Because some of these packages can be upwards of thousands of dollars. I mean, I think Cool Sculpting, you can buy packages of almost up to 4,000, depending upon how many you do. So it's also allowed the industry to scale. I think it's very fascinating to see. And I really hope, if they haven't, and I'll ask you, has anybody done any sort of documentary on the aesthetic industry and how rapidly it's grown over the last 2 decades?
No, but I think that would be a good thing for you to do.
Well, when you mean anybody listening, because I am not a documentarian. I was not a podcaster several months ago. I had to learn, and I'm still learning as I go. But yeah, I don't know anything about documentaries, and I'm not a journalist.
Do you like to watch documentaries though, like on TV?
If they're interesting. Honestly, I haven't found many great documentaries.
Me either.
Recently, and I don't know if it's just because everything is so hyper political or hyper aggressive when it comes to points of view. I don't know if there's any, let's go to seek the truth. I think there's always an agenda behind them. And so, I mean, the last great documentary that I saw was on the owner or the company Theranos are you familiar with Theranos?
I'm not.
Yeah, there was a biotech company where this very bright entrepreneur was raising a lot of money for a device that would use 1 pin prick of blood and run all of these diagnostic testing in a small box. I mean, it was billions of dollars was raised in Silicon Valley, and the box never really worked. And I think she's in trial right now for fraud, but wow. It's a really great documentary. But I go back to like the McDonald's documentary, Super Size Me.
Yes. Have you done, or how about Grain Brain?
Yes, exactly. Fork, there was I think it was Fork to Table or something about,
yes,
veganism. And I think documentaries have their place. I wish there were more documentaries. I think Angie, I really think the problem is I don't think there's any money in documentaries anymore because everybody wants to shoot a big budget movie and make a lot of money, whereas documentaries are kind of bootstrapped. And I just don't, I don't know. I could be completely wrong. I'm not really in touch with that type of industry, but you just kind of see the documentaries dry up. But no, I'd love to see a documentary of the aesthetic world, medicine in general, healthcare in general. I think it would be absolutely fascinating. Even a great one would be, in my opinion, technology. Technology entered sales 20 years ago with CRMs, and it's still evolving. There are sales enablement platforms. In fact, the sponsor of the show is Rhythm. It is the sales technology company that I founded with two partners. And we have talked to many companies, and it is an emerging market. And so I think in about 10 years or 15 years, we will see the sales technology industry about the same spot where aesthetic industry is today, where everybody's using multiple platforms to do the same job. So, but no,
you know who I work for, and to get a device in my office, you know what I have to do to get a device in the office. I love and respect Dr. Graper so very much because he never wants to do anything to hurt our credibility, nor do I.
Yeah.
And so if it's the radio frequency microneedling device, then we try every one of them.
Yeah.
And so we like to do our own case studies. I feel like when some of the companies come in with their company photos, their pictures, they're just not realistic all the time. And so we like to take someone on staff or a staff's wife or whatever and do our own case study. Use the device 3 times in a row and see how she looks before we buy it. So we like to do our own homework there. And you know that about us. You've been with us for.
Oh yeah, you guys like to create your own little micro documentaries.
We do.
Little trials. No, it's very fascinating. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've gotten along so well with your office and doctors Harper and Graper is because there's no fluff. It is very, all right, if you claim it's going to do X, let's test it. And if it does X, right, well, I'm a man of my word. I'm going to get it. It's very straightforward. It's very refreshing in an industry of double talk and double speak where somebody is actually true to their word. Because I feel like I'm very true to my word. And so I really appreciate when I see that in others and I get treated with that same level of respect. And so it makes me want to help and promote that clinic more often. So
I appreciate that. I feel like you get learned by getting burned, right? And so 10 years ago, maybe longer, 15 years ago, we learned by getting burned. And I said, okay, then this is how we stop this, right? And then to your point about devices going into dermatology and OBGYN offices, I think that goes into insurance and healthcare. I think that piece has changed drastically.
Yeah.
So now they're taking things that are self-pay, right? And incorporating that into their practice because insurance and healthcare has changed for those guys as well.
Surviving Outside Sales podcast is brought to you by Rhythm AI. If you are in outside sales, check out rhythmai.com. That's RITHM AI.com. The sales enablement tool that will help outside sales teams build their best sales days every day. Rhythm. Prospecting, targeting, and routing simplified. Everything an outside sales team needs, nothing it doesn't. Try for $1 for the first month today. That's rhythmai.com. Now back to the show.
I will say this. I also had some conversations. So I went to, it's a big surgical conference in Arizona. It was the ASDS, American Society of Dermatological Surgery. And I remember at one of the mixers speaking with a couple of physicians, and they were one of the speakers at our company. I do not remember the gentleman's name, but he's very well known in the dermatology world. And he was talking about the fact that he only works like 3 days in clinic. He does 1 day of consulting with around the country with other physicians, pay him to learn what he knows about the industry. And then He either travels for a day or he just takes it off. And these doctors in Alabama were just floored that they were working like 5 days a week, 8 to 6 to keep the doors open because of what you said, the lower reimbursement.
Right.
So they said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, you've got to have revenue drivers nowadays. And so that's when he kind of laid the blueprint out that they needed to follow for building an aesthetic side. And so that, to what you said, Angie, I think that's what's drastically changed over the last 5 years. And I saw it firsthand and it happened on our side in the pharmaceutical world. And that's one reason why I exited the pharmaceutical world, was I was seeing the writing on the wall. The coverage was getting horrible. It's very difficult to get a lot of branded products at smaller companies covered. And the company I was working for was smaller, and the coverage was dwindling down to under 20%. And I said, it's not going to get better. There's not going to all of a sudden insurances are going to say, you know what, let's bring those products onto formulary. And so I saw the writing on the wall. And so at that time was basically the same type of change in the dermatology scene where they were realizing, okay, I want to work smarter. We're experts in the skin. Truly, dermatologists are experts in the skin. We can also pivot. We've got the people coming indoors. We might as well just keep them to do the aesthetic side as well. They already trust us with their skin. So it's a natural fit for dermatology to have an aesthetic side. And so I witnessed that. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the company that was doing post-procedure kits, because it wasn't just for plastic surgery, it was also in dermatology for most procedures. And so it was healing the skin afterwards, and it was a direct sale position, and I loved it. And it was kind of the future of, if you're going to stay in this industry, it's got to be direct sales. And it can't be something passive down the road. It has to be something that's going to drive revenue. It's going to promote the brand of the company that's buying it, and it's going to make their bottom line stronger and make them better. And it's not just about money, but it's, like you said, Dr. Graper and Dr. Harper do not want to bring something in that might make them money, but doesn't work.
Right.
So,
and that's to your point there. I mean, I'm honored that they allow me and wanted me to carry my Loveskin by Angie Thomas line that I developed in the office to compete with other lines that we have, because I think they know me well enough that I'm not going to create and develop something that doesn't work. Not as seasoned as I am, and knowing what I know and being able to read ingredient decks. And I knew what I wanted to put in it. And I knew that I had to be competitive or I wouldn't be successful. So in choosing a great reputable pharmaceutical line to help me with this, in the beginning became overwhelming because I wanted to do everything. I wanted to do acne. I wanted to do a men's line. I wanted to do sunscreen. And then I said, okay, Angie, all right, girl, you need to calm down and focus on what you know. And what I know is I treat a lot of women like myself that are in menopause. And during menopause, that skin changes the most. So the only other thing I thought about was acne, because acne challenges me so much. That's a tough skin to treat. But I tried to just stay in my lane and develop 10 products that are very powerful for anti-aging. And so that's what I did with Loveskin. And so it was during quarantine that I just said to myself, with much prayer, much sweat and tears, I'm going to take something negative and turn it into a positive. Because honest, Mike, when we first went into quarantine, it was scary. I remember sitting on the screened-in porch with my husband and him saying, don't worry, honey, this is probably only going to last a couple of weeks. And a couple of weeks later, we're like, okay, it's going to be more than a couple of weeks. And so I did, I started this like 3 years ago and I couldn't finish it. It was just too overwhelming. And so I thought, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my skincare line. And I had my husband's blessing. I'm the skin guru. He's an engineer, so he's a tech guy, so there we went with web development, and everything that was involved. And here we are, 9 months later, and just cannot believe how successful it's been. So that's kind of the journey that we were on. And I'll back up and say, like, during the first 2 weeks of quarantine, like, so many patients were reaching out. Oh my gosh, I'm out of this and such. What do I do? And then fast forward 4 weeks when we knew we weren't going back, they're like, oh my gosh, I need to be dermaplaned. How can I chemical peel myself at home? What do I do? And what can I buy? Where can I go? What should I go to the website? So it was this whole conversation, of patient panic, and that their skin that I'd treated for over 30 years was just going to go to pot, right? It was just, so what do I do? And in that we were working with all of our skincare lines, trying to decide, how can we do this? Let's do a Zoom party. Let's invite patients in. Let's teach them how to take care of their skin. Let's offer a discount. And I thought to myself, you know what? Skincare is going online now, not for treatment, but for sales. And I think COVID really, really, really amplified that, because skincare companies got real aggressive in offering all kinds of specials to try to get people through the quarantine time. And it has continued. And, I remember having this conversation with many reps and Dr. Graper, some of the lunch and learns there in the kitchen, and him saying, we want to have you. We want you on our shelf, but it's hard to compete with your online sales. So what are you going to do for us? How much do you want us to have a business with you? And so it's the way it's been headed for the last 5-7 years. But I definitely would say that quarantine taught our patients how to shop online, how to be social media savvy, how to look for the best deals. And for myself included, I never bought my groceries online. I love to go into the grocery store, feeling and touching and seeing, what I needed. But it taught us to shop online, and like I said, in more ways than one, but for sure, skincare.
I remember having a conversation with you. So we were introduced to each other in 2018. And so a couple of years before COVID. And I remember having a conversation with you, I think in 2019. And you were, I kind of asked you what was going on. It was during one of our, lunch and learns in the office. And the surgeon, or, the doctors were in surgery and they were not coming in yet. And so I remember you were mentioning you wanted to do a skincare line. You had plans for something bigger for yourself. And so you had just mentioned you'd think about it for like 3 years. Walk through, was there a moment? You had mentioned it was the start of quarantine, but talk about that moment. Was it when you were talking with your husband on the porch where you just said, where the light bulb just went off and I said, now is the time? Do you remember, was it a moment or?
It was, I'm a prayer warrior. I'm a woman of faith. And so it was a scripture. It was in Proverbs, and it says, she is clothed in strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. Proverbs 31:25. And that was my game changer.
Yeah, it was one door closed. A lot of people thought that COVID closed a lot of opportunities, but I feel like it opened a lot of doors and windows, as they say. And I know that was, kind of my aha moment, but I apologize. Go ahead.
No, just it kind of landed in my heart. And then I reached out to my pharmaceutical group, and oddly enough, the gal that was my rep, that was going to be my rep for my line, I knew her in our industry. And so that was another confirmation for me. And through that conversation, she became my biggest cheerleader. And gave me the confidence, that I needed. And the desire was there. It was just, like I said, 3 years ago, and knowing that I wanted to do it, it just felt so overwhelming because, as you know, I'm busy at work. I'm busy. I see somewhere between 12 and 16 people a day. So at the end of the day, there was just no time left, right? You got your family. And so, but it's like I told my kids, I haven't had 8 weeks off of work since I was 15 years old. I've been working since I was 15, right? I've taken a week's vacation or two, but I've never had that kind of time off. And so that, and the blessing of my husband, who just thought it was the best idea, 3 years ago, and just said, let's do this. I'm going to help you. He was home. He was quarantined. He's in racing, and racing kind of shut down. And so, it was he and I, that just decided, let's put our heads together and let's follow through on this.
How did you bring up this topic with Dr. Graper? Because you're basically trying to create a revenue stream that while you're working for Graper Harper, and they're not going to receive any of that. You're competing, you're creating a competition for them. And I know they've been very supportive, but were you fearful of presenting the idea? Walk through kind of, because the reason why I bring this up, I think there's a lot of people right now that are struggling in the sales world specifically, and maybe in your world as well. I mean, you're in sales as an esthetician, but I mean, outside sales, people are struggling. They have an idea, maybe they want to chart their own path, but they're afraid of talking to their manager. They're afraid of letting anybody know for the repercussions of being fired or terminated immediately, where they don't have a chance to build up their plan. Were you worried at all about bringing this up to your employers?
I was a little.
Mm-hmm.
I was more worried about my relationship with the estheticians because I have so much respect for them and their knowledge and their care and their ability to sell as well. I felt like I might have the blessing of Dr. Harper and Dr. Graper, but yes, there was a little bit of fear in that. And I knew that if I didn't have their blessing, then I had a presence online. So I had a backup. I had a website that was built. I hired someone to help me with my social media presence due to time and lack of knowledge on how to do that. So I had a backup. Mm-hmm. But really, I wanted it just to be a smooth transition. And so in doing so, I wanted to honor the fact that, I'll pay you, Dr. Graper, to put it on your shelf, and I'll pay commission to the estheticians in order to honor the sales that they would, sell Loveskin, because again, we have 7 skincare lines.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was definitely fear there, but I tried to come up with a game plan for commission, for the way to position it, the way to bring it in, to let the estheticians know that it was not a threat. This is just a passion. It's something I had started and wanted to do. And so I feel like overall, I got everybody's blessing. Mm-hmm. And again, my backup plan was my social media presence and my website.
Yeah. Did you get any pushback or any kind of angst from the sales reps for the other skincare lines? Because in essence, you're also competing with them. Did that kind of change as you went from almost somebody that they were selling to, and now they viewed you as competition?
Well, not to my face.
Yeah, touche.
Not to my face. I have great relationships with my reps, and I treat a lot of them. A lot of them come to me for skincare, and I'm honored that they choose to come to me. Really, I mean that sincerely, because they have lots of choices out in the field. Yeah. But for the most part, everybody's like, wow, Angie, that's amazing. Congratulations. And, I'm 10 products. And I plan to grow. I'm launching a lash serum on September the 20th. We go into 10 days of beauty, September 20th through October 1st. And so this is going to be my first launch since I started. So my first new product launch, excuse me. So, I started small, and, I want to grow. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be, somewhat successful and not go under. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's always right? A good thing with the business, right? Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what I would say. Start small and just grow yourself as you can.
Well, I just so the listeners right now, I've known Angie for several years, but I can just tell extremely driven and persistent and rolls with the punches. And Angie, what I've found in the entrepreneurial path, it's not rainbows and butterflies. There's a lot of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Mm-hmm. And so talk about, were there any times where you felt like you wanted to quit? It was just overwhelming. You mentioned your faith. which I think is the backbone for a lot of people. What kind of pushed you through? Was it your support system? Was it just a drive of, I'm going to do this? Where have you found that spirit to continue your journey?
I think skincare is going to be my passion until the day I die, right? And so I'm in this, I'm not a quitter. I'm in this.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there was a time a couple, 3 months ago that it was just overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Because between me and you and the audience, I mean, I'm my shipper. And until I get big enough to hire somebody to ship my product, as you get those online sales, my weekends were spent shipping product. So it was kind of consuming me and taking me away from my family and other things. So I just had to have a moment and decide, am I going to continue this? Because I still really wasn't making any money, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like my online presence was going to be better than it was, and it wasn't. So I had to make some tweaks there, and those tweaks have made it more successful. So yeah, I've had some moments, but I think any new business has that in their first year.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to pray about it. You have to have a support like a husband or a wife, and just decide, what are we going to do? You have to have some goals. You have to have a budget. You have to, make sure that you can hang on until you can't, right?
Yep. Exactly. And you also have to pivot if things aren't working, or
You got to pivot.
if it takes you another direction, you just have to pivot and just don't look back. Several years ago, I don't remember who told me this, but they said, life is so much better looking through the front windshield than looking at the rearview mirror. And
Amen to that.
I don't have regret in my life, but there are things that I used to look back. One of them was my baseball career. I used to look back in the rearview mirror and always say, what if I had done this? Or what if I had done that? And then it was almost like I was a prisoner of my past. And one day I just let go. And I said, I'm not going to look through the rear view anymore. Today, right, in September, I've got, 2 beautiful young daughters, beautiful wife. I'm very blessed. And I have a support system to allow me to be an entrepreneur and do some out of the box things that really make me happy. And what your thing was, you want to do skin till the day you die. Your passion is skin. Well, mine is helping salespeople. It is giving back to the sales community. That is my passion. And I'm doing that in the forms of consulting with multiple companies and helping them build sales teams. It is building sales technology, and it's doing this podcast. My wife's been super supportive, and it's taken a lot of time. It's not about the money. It is about giving back to a network of people who've helped me along the way, and also creating a higher sense of community in the outside sales world. And
I love that, Mike. I love that, because when I teach at the school, I feel the same way, because I am older, I am seasoned, I have been in my industry longer than a lot of women. And when I'm at the school, the students are so eager, they want to learn, and I just love it. I love being there. And Christy Pabst, who owns the school here, Beth Honeycutt, Susie Nichols, all those girls, they are sharp. I get in there and they challenge me. Like you said, the industry has changed, and I'm open to learning no matter where I am. But when I go to the school here in Charlotte, I am so impressed with what those girls are doing to educate estheticians that are going to be coming up behind me.
Yeah. And it's really, the old phrase is, when people have success, I never wanted to be that person that kicked the ladder down so nobody else could reach. I want to pull everybody up. I want to throw as many ropes down as possible and start pulling as many people up. And I don't know, it's kind of cheesy, but it pains me when somebody gives up on a sales career. And I know several people who've given up on sales careers because they just ran into a lot of roadblocks. A lot of the roadblocks, honestly, I ran into. I'm just really stubborn. But, and if I put my mind to it, I might hit 1,000 roadblocks. I'm going to move around 1,001. And so that's just kind of my mentality. I
love that, though, and I've always said in our industry to people who say negative things about, I don't know, whether it's somebody in our industry that doesn't believe in dermaplaning or doesn't believe in chemical peeling. And then there's, somebody here in Charlotte that's kind of a skin local celebrity but I've always said, girls, there's plenty of skin to go around. Let's support each other. I say that when I teach at the school. There's no need to be ugly to each other. Support each other, be each other's mentors, find a way to help one another because, look how much Charlotte has grown. There is plenty of skin to go around. We don't need to fight about it.
On a previous episode, and something I talk about all the time, a rising tide rises all boats. And like you said, the population of Charlotte has exploded. And so there is more opportunity than there ever has been before. And so one of the things that's really plagued our industry, Angie, is the negative talk. You don't want to use that product. So when we talked about Indiba in one of the ventures that I'm in right now, I said, yeah, use it all. Use it in combination. Use it with everything else. I don't, there is still competition, but it's not cutting somebody else's legs out from underneath them in order to make you look taller. That is the negative side of sales that has taken over the last 15 years that I don't want to be a part of. If I'm presenting to somebody, I want them to buy my product, not because I knock someone else down, but I've elevated my representation of whatever I have there. And that elevates the value of the client. It elevates their brand. And if that's not there, then I really don't feel comfortable selling to you. And so
and with Loveskin, I feel the same way, Mike. I mean, if my cleanser doesn't work for you, then I am seasoned enough to make a different recommendation. And having more than one skincare line, we cherry pick in order to accommodate a patient's needs. And if Mrs. Jones, will say Mrs. Jones comes in and she is married to a skincare line that has worked for her for 15 years, I will educate her and offer to fill in the blank. But if that's what Mrs. Jones likes, then she's welcome to use that.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, that's the thing about skincare. And with my line being small right now, I can't accommodate everything that a skin might need. So I love having more than one skincare line. And I think there are some fantastic products out there. Is mine great? It is. It is. But there's plenty to go around, right?
I can vouch for that. So I am actually a client of Angie's. My wife and I have products that we've purchased from her. In fact, I need to get some more, but I use the cleanser and I use the moisturizer, and I've used a lot of products in the past. And it's actually a very funny story because not a lot of guys usually moisturize, but I have been for almost 20 years because I had an older sister that I briefly lived with post college. And she asked me, she goes, "Are you doing anything for your skin?" And I said, "No, I'm a guy." And she goes, "Well, let me put it to you this way. Do you want to look like a catcher's mitt in about 30 years? And I was like, "No." And she goes, "Here, why don't you try this?" And so she gave me,
that's great.
She gave me some Clinique, and it started off as Clinique. And she goes, "Try this." And because I asked her, I was like, "What kind of advice can you give me?" She said, "You need to moisturize your skin." And so she put the fear of God in me. And in my early 20s, I did not want to look like a catcher's mitt when I was 50. And so I have been using different products over the last 20 years. And so when Angie got her product, I think I got it a couple months ago, and I absolutely love it. Now, I will say this, I have been really bad at applying it, with two little ones.
You just have a baby.
I know, with two little ones, I kind of forget about the skincare routine at night, but I do love it. I love the texture. And of course, it's a great product because you created it. So I'm a product of your product. And so I really like it. My wife really likes the cleanser, but she has other products that she's loyal to. And so, as Angie mentioned, you're not trying to stick a square peg into a round hole. What you're trying to do is you're trying to find the right people that can use your product. And yeah, if you're listening right now, everyone's skin is different. So
everyone's skin is different.
You can't just say, well, this is the only thing that I'm going to use. And so
as you age, I mean, you can't use the same product that you used when you were 20.
Exactly.
You know,
I upgraded from the Clinique for Men skincare line from the mall.
good for you.
Yes, and I upgraded and I've been using products ever since. And so I've also, being in the aesthetic world, I get a lot of samples and
Sure.
estheticians will say, hey, what do you think of this? Try this. We're trying to grab more male customers, patients, give us your feedback. How would we do this? And so I've kind of done some micro consulting for some med spas and aesthetic centers because they're trying to grab more male customers, which I've heard is that segment has exploded over the last several years.
It definitely has. My male patient base has really, really changed. I mean, it's mostly the husbands of the wives that have been coming to me for years, and they're aging. And,
Yep.
you know, women really, they've been taking care of themselves coming in for 20, 30. And he's looking at her saying, okay, I got to do something.
He's got to keep
Help
up.
me. Yeah, you're
Most-
looking really good. And here's my thing
You know.
to a guy, you know, you hadn't been using anything. So just put 2 products on and I promise you, you're going to get a change.
Oh yeah.
You
exactly.
know, and the biggest thing for my men is sunscreen. Just guys are really kind of picky about their sunscreens.
Yeah.
That's my next thing too, is that, you know, to develop a sunscreen. And there are big changes that I cannot announce yet coming with Loveskin. So it's probably going to be the beginning of the year. But I'm super excited, just to give you a little teaser there. So we've got some things for 2022, and I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that I met you. I'm grateful for my relationship with you. I appreciate you so much for just having me on and allowing me to talk about Loveskin and about my career and my path and how I got here. I would encourage anybody, any entrepreneur to, like you said, Mike, I'm going to use it. Don't look in the rearview mirror, look in the windshield. I mean, I'm going to use that one for my children. You know, I've got a kid who was in college last year and, you know, decided to take a semester off this year. And this semester, I think he's wondering if he did the right thing. But, you know, everybody's journey is different. There's a lot of different ways to get there, but stay true to who you are.
Yeah. And so going back to the surviving outside sales, and one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you, Angie, was how you epitomize all of the different phases. And I actually learned something today. I don't think we talked about the fact that you were in outside sales in the beginning, but you know, the slogan or the tagline is get in, dominate, and get out. And so that's kind of the evolution of what you have done in your career. And so I hope that anybody who's listening right now who wants to follow in Angie's footsteps will connect with her. And so, Angie, how can the audience reach out to you and connect with you?
You can reach out to me through my Instagram, which is angie.loveskin. You can also through my website, www.angieloveskin.com. And then, of course, I'm at Graper Harper Cosmetic Surgery. You can reach out to me there as well, but primarily on Instagram.
Okay. Where do you ship? Just the United States? Do you ship internationally?
I do. I don't yet. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Yeah. No. Hey, there's somewhere to go from there. So
there's somewhere to go. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know what? 2022, that's in our future. So yeah.
It's a little scary when you said that, and I kind of like flinched a second. I was like, oh my gosh. It is almost 2022. That is blowing my mind more than anything else. But with that, obviously comes a lot of new great challenges, a lot of excitement. Angie, thank you so much for joining the Surviving Outside Sales podcast. I think for those of you who are listening, I hope you really enjoyed that. A very pioneering woman in the aesthetic industry and skincare industry. And please try her products out. They are fantastic. And it might just change the products that you're using currently. So all the information for Angie will be in our show notes. And Angie, is there any last words you'd like to have with the audience?
First of all, Mike, thank you. I'm so proud of what you're doing with your podcast. This is amazing. You know, you're such a go-getter. You too are an inspiration to me because I've seen you in many different facets. And here you are, a family man trying to make it all happen, make it work. And you too are an inspiration to me. So thank you. You've been a genuine friend. And I'm super excited for what God has for your future. So I encourage people to reach out to me. I'm very personable. I'm very easy. So yeah, if you have any questions, again, just I encourage you to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we will catch you next time on the Surviving Outside Sales podcast. Angie, hope you have a great day.
Thank you.